Hi, friends. Welcome to Bar of the Conference. I'm your host, Derek Scott III. Today's episode is with Lisa Greenwood. Lisa is an ordained elder in the North Texas Annual Conference and currently serves as the president and CEO of Texas Methodist Foundation and Wesleyan Impact Partners. She lives in Dallas with her husband, Joe Park. I'm excited about this episode in part because my experience of Lisa is that she is a leader of leaders and a visionary who is laser focused on the mission of the church. In this conversation, we talk about her upbringing in Texas Methodism, her exploration of her call to ministry, and the road that has led her to serving in the foundation sector of the church. We talked about her work at TMF and Wesleyan Impact Partners and the commitment those organizations have made definitely to the United Methodist Church, but also to the broader Wesleyan ecosystem. Lisa is not afraid to address the concerns of the current season we are in as United Methodist. But she's also not distracted from the work of resourcing the church for an innovative and faithful ministry into the future. This interview inspired, informed, and challenged my thoughts on the future of the UMC. And I think you're going to feel a similar way. So grab that notebook, that choice beverage, and let's listen to this interview with Lisa Greenwood. Lisa Greenwood, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Derek. I'm so excited to be with you.
Oh, I am so stoked to have you on the podcast. We have been working for a couple of months to make this happen, and I'm just thankful that you were willing to keep working with me to find the time, and I'm just excited to hear more of your story. We have done a lot of work in different spaces for different reasons over the years, and we'll be doing more work together in the coming months that I'm excited about. And I know little bits and pieces about the story of Reverend Lisa Greenwood, but I'd love to hear a little bit more. And really, it kind of started at the beginning, like how you became a United Methodist Christian, how God's prevenient grace has acted in your life to bring you into our denomination. I'd love to start there.
Sure. Okay, so I'll try to streamline this a little bit, but to say that I grew up in a family with 4 kids. I'm the third of 4, and we moved around, but when I was 10, moved to Dallas, and we searched around for a church home and found a Methodist church home. My mom had grown up Methodist, my dad Baptist, but we found First United Methodist Church of Richardson, and it was just a thriving congregation with lots of ministry for children and youth, and great worship, and continues to be that. I still claim it as my home church that really formed and shaped me. Although my charge conference is at another church that's nearby. But anyway, so I grew up going to church on Sundays and going to worship, and grew up in that youth group. But I would say my real formation and calling came out of my camping experience. Like so many folks can say, trace it back to those experiences. In our case, it was at Bridgeport, Texas, our conference camp, and I, through the just beautiful ministry and witness of Fred Winslow and Walt Markham and Don Smith and so many others, and Cammie Gaston that were in leadership there, who helped Scripture come alive for me as kids, like as youth, planned worship and dug into the Bible. And so I think I first fell in love with the Bible and the stories of Jesus. But also it was a place where I experienced grace, like real, this is what it means to show up for each other, to love each other. And I felt that high on that mountaintop of Bridgeport. And then all through the year would try to live that as this teenager and such. So I felt called to ministry. I could go into that whole story. I, at the time in high school, didn't have images of women in ministry. And though my family was super supportive of my being able to, and I'm using air quotes here, do anything, like that, we would often say I would be the first woman president of the United States. Like it was sort of, that was kind of the joke in the family, and I could do anything. But there was no sense that ministry was kind of an option. So, I mean, nowhere in my imagination other than at camp. And so I sort of tucked it away and thought, oh, maybe, I'll just be super supportive of the youth pastor when I'm an adult and I'm in, I just didn't know what that looked like. And so then I went to college and thought about being a doctor, which is really what, as a teenager, I'd kind of imagined I would do. And so I took classes toward that. And then by my junior year, it was time to decide. And I feel like this is too long a story, but I'll just kind of.
Oh, no, you're doing great. This is good.
So I remember the moment sitting in my apartment, my junior year, and you have to declare your major and your minor, right? That up until now, you've kind of been pointed somewhere, but this is time to declare and finish out your upper level classes and get your degree and blah, blah, blah. And so I remember thinking medicine, psychology, and like sort of counseling. I had always been interested in politics and kind of changing the world. And I thought about teaching, but so those were kind of the major thing. By this time, I'd gotten out of my pre-med stuff. I was in liberal arts.
Okay, I was wondering.
No, I pretty much said this,
racking up all the credits for all the classes.
yeah. So, but I had shifted. I just realized that anyway. But I still was thinking, it wasn't out of the question, but I looked at all those things and I had this kind of Jonah moment, if you will, of realizing that all of those things that I had named were all about this deeper calling to help to be about human flourishing and thriving in the world. That's language I'm using now, but really sort of well-being of humans and communities and the world, right? That all of them were about that. And I had this kind of moment of clarity, which that's sort of how I've understood the Holy Spirit to work and to speak in my life, has been less about words or a voice, but clarity. It's almost like the fog clears a bit and I go, oh, So I remember it was fall of my junior year, and I pretty quickly made an appointment to see a couple of these folks that I named from summer camp and have a conversation and say, what do I do with this? Like, I think this is real. I think I'm being called into ministry. And so they were super affirming and helped me, through the process in the Methodist Church. There was a purple book, discernment, and get to start the process. And
there are people that literally heard you say purple book, and they were like, yeah, I know about that purple book. Yeah.
Right, I remember. Yeah, and the weird thing was when I told my parents, they just thought it was a phase. Like they were not affirming at all in that. I had never experienced my parents not being affirming, right? In that sense, right? And so it was very strange. It was a very difficult time for me, really, for a couple of years. And I continued to pursue, and I did well at school and all the things that I needed to do, but but my parents never, they'd talk about that. would in their hear them tell a friend, yeah, Lisa will probably go to law school like her sister and brother, just like refusing to admit, like it was the weirdest thing. Mm. And so then when it was time to choose seminaries, I visited a couple, but it came down to Perkins, which was in Dallas, which was, home, and Methodist and all of that, and Yale Divinity School. And I loved my time at Yale and my visit, when I, and I think ultimately what was the deciding factor for me was that if I went to Perkins, I would be in my kind of bubble of my home conference, the people who knew me and raised me. I'd work in a Methodist church. I would never have the question, why am I Methodist? And is this the right path for me? And I actually had that question in my mind. I was pursuing ministry in the Methodist church because I'd grown up in the Methodist church, but not because I had a really clear sense that this was the right place for my theology and my calling and all of that. And so I decided to get outside of my comfort zone, and I went to Yale Divinity, which was a great experience for me and the right decision. And I went to the Methodism professor who was adjunct. He was a pastor nearby and just a brilliant man and lovely. And I made my case for being in his Methodist history and doctrine class before it was the normal trajectory, because I said, I need to know if this is the right path. I don't know. And he said, okay. And I fell in love with John Wesley. I just was like, yes, this is who I am. Like, and I just to be clear, I know Wesley had his faults, but the theology and the purpose and this sense of marrying this scriptural holiness, which is of course how I came into faith, that I fell in love with Bible and in scripture and what it is to dig into and peel back the layers and apply it to our lives. And then this sort of holiness of life too, and the marrying of that. And so that was all of that. Again, a bit of a long story too.
Lisa, I love, we needed every bit of that. I want us to move on into the journey a little bit. And so what my question though may be too early. So feel free to be like, it's too early to ask that question.
Yeah,
but
no.
I know you as a person who not just appreciates the diversity of the Wesleyan tradition, but you call it forth. I mean, it's one of the things that I love about you. Like, I feel like you will not let any of us just be typical United Methodists, or just be typical Wesleyans. Like, you're like, no, I want to see like how you are uniquely this one piece of the larger whole. And so I'm wondering, is that appreciation? I mean, and honestly, Lisa, I feel like you've got that appreciation just about humanity in general. But I wonder that appreciation in general, but specifically out of the Wesleyan tradition, was that stirred in you while you were at Yale, or did that? Yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
No, I think that's a great thread to pull on, because I did choose it because I wanted to get out of my comfort and just decide, am I United Methodist? Am I Methodist? Am I Wesleyan? And absolutely fully embraced that. And the really beautiful and challenging thing about being at YDS was that we were in this mix, right? So my besties, my running buddies were, Episcopalian, now an Episcopal bishop in Nebraska, a Presbyterian who now does spiritual direction and all kinds of creative work, who lives in Colorado, and a Unitarian Universalist who I've stayed in touch with. And we just had this mix, and there was, interestingly enough, kind of the whole broad spectrum of theology and belief, I spent a year as a chapel minister. So there were 3 students that were chosen each year to be chapel applied and all of that, but chapel ministers, and because we had chapel every day, and I went to chapel every day. It was a very much a part of my formation during seminary, and we worked across theological lines, so there was Church of Christ and there was Catholic and and think about the edges, and there was Baptist and there were Methodists and Episcopalians, and there was just this mix of folks who all in worship have deeply held convictions about how worship is done and how communion is done. And we had to think about transubstantiation and whether our bread was too crumbly, because that would really be Jesus on the floor, and we couldn't have that. That was not okay, And at the same time, who got included in communion, and whether our Catholic priest friends could actually serve communion to a diverse group. There were all these considerations that helped the conversation to move to a level of what is the theological core here, and what are we trying to do, and can we serve that higher purpose here, and not get to the place of, using Wesley's language, that maybe the negotiables, if you will. There's some that are non-negotiable, but what can we? We had to navigate that, and we had to be in conversation, and very thoughtful, honoring conversation, even when we used different versions of the Lord's Prayer and what that did for person's ability to enter into the space, and the kinds of music. I can just go on and on. Worship, right, tends to be that place where both our personal preferences and our deeply held theological convictions come to bear. And so that was that really was such a formative experience for me. And
Oh gosh, we'll probably pull that thread a little bit more as we continue on. So you come through Yale Divinity School, confirm your sense of call within the United Methodist Church, and you choose to come back home.
Yes, which was tricky. North Texas was experiencing what I know lots of conferences don't, but that is, we had more clergy than we had spaces. And so, we all got a letter that said, you might want to look for other options. And so I actually was going to stay. I was enjoying the Northeast and Connecticut, and that same professor that had been my Methodism professor was game to bring me on his staff. And, we were having great conversations about all that, but then I was appointed to a church in Texas. And so, if you're sort of doing the math here, I went straight through. And so I was ordained a deacon. Back then we ordained a deacon and then elder, and in 92, and I was 24 years old. And so I'm about to, in August, I'll be 56, just to say it to the world. But, wow. And so, I've been ordained, 31 years in the church. And so, a lot has happened in these years. That's what I will say. A lot has happened, not just in my own life, but in the life of the church, of course. And,
What did you appreciate about your time in the local church?
Oh, so much. So let me say, in those, just to pull on that thread about kind of the diversity of thought and bringing people to the table, youth ministry will also do that. This, and college ministry and such will do this, because you've got young people who are at least stating outwardly, though their parents go to church and they're coming and they're attending, they're saying, yeah, I don't believe that stuff. I mean, they're just wrestling with what they believe in and what they don't believe in. And then they're bringing their friends who are from these other churches or who are questioning whether or not God really exists or this even makes sense or how to wrestle with this. And so, you know, when you bring folks together and questions, and you make space for questions, and you bring together all these different perspectives, and you create a table, literally a table of grace, and a space for wondering and wandering and asking questions, and a place of covenant and care and belonging, and invite these young people into questions of deeper meaning, I think that also broadens your perspective. And so, you know, those 10 years, and I was at Highland Park United Methodist for a couple of years, and then I was in Denton for 8.5 years, and that was the place where I did the most of that youth ministry, and I loved it, and for so many reasons. And then when I served in commerce, I never imagined I'd be a preacher, but I loved the rhythm. I loved, and I still to this day get crazy nervous about preaching, but I also love it because I feel like it's this moment where I bring all the exegetical work I've done and my love of scripture, and I bring this wrestling that happens in the midst of the preparation for the sermon, but it all feels like a moment of Holy Spirit carrying, you know, the 10 hours plus or whatever that went into the preparation. I preach without notes, so that standing in front of the congregation and just trusting that, oh my gosh, God, I know you've got to have this. We have done enough wrestling for this moment, and so there is this surrender, this very real. I mean, I'm you know, I feel it in my body even as I say this, right? Surrender that happens, and I'll be honest, I don't love guest preaching because it's a parachute drop into a moment, but I loved being part of the rhythm of a congregation's life. And I loved planning how we would dig into the text and how it would be connected to their small group and Sunday school rhythm and the rhythms of the church calendar, but also the rhythms of what was happening in our town and our community and in the life of different congregation members, and how does that intersect? It's, you know, way back from my teenage camp years to, you know, doing that in a larger scale in the congregation, and I loved that. And so after commerce, well, there's another little piece, but just staying with the local church, I got to help launch a worshiping community at First Methodist Richardson. So I got to go home, which was lovely. And the senior pastor there now is Clayton Oliphant, who many people know. And Clayton is just a solid gold human being. He just, I mean, he has formed one of the healthiest churches and staffs you would ever come to know, and they are thriving and vibrant. And I loved getting to work with Clayton and to form this new modern worshiping community, which is still thriving and doing great work. And so getting to do that was really beautiful. And so when I went to the foundation, and I'll talk about that story because, that was probably the hardest thing. Was I still felt deeply connected to the mission of the church and the purposes of the church, but I missed the rhythms. I missed the rhythms of worship and being part of a local church community, and I missed it like deep in my soul.
I feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
man. Yeah. So, Lisa, when I first met you, you rolled into a set of meetings at at the invitation of Bishop Ken Carter in the Florida Conference. It was you and Bishop Janice Huey.
Yes.
And for the first 2-3 times that I would be in the same room with you, you were sitting at the right hand of Bishop Huey. And so I want to definitely talk about foundation life, but I'd love to hear. There may not be as much here, but like your relationship with Bishop Huey, and that feels significant to me. In the many spaces that I've encountered you, and definitely have encountered you without Bishop Huey. But
yeah, for sure.
But that seems to be a special relationship.
Oh, absolutely.
From where I'm sitting.
Yeah. So, just to do a shameless plug for my own podcast, but
yes, please.
But this next season that we have coming out is about holy friendships and sanctifying friendship. And one of those episodes will be with 2 very dear friends of mine, Bishop Janice Riggle Huey and Bishop Laura Merrill. And and just digging a little bit into that friendship and what that's meant. But I will say my first encounter with Bishop Huey was, probably 25 years ago. And we were at a jurisdictional clergy women's gathering at Mount Sequoia in Arkansas. And I remember her addressing the group, and she was recently elected a bishop, and she said a couple of things. She was just reminding us to kind of be strong as clergy women and step up and live into it and claim our voice and our power and our calling and all of that. And it was so inspiring, as she always is. She's such a in her bones, she's a mentor, a encourager, a coach. She's just this lovely one who lifts others up. And she said 2 things that I remember. I'm sure she said other things, but one, she said, "Wear bright." The men in the room are going to be in gray, navy, or black. So wear bright, and which I love. And then she also said, "Say yes." Find a way to say yes. You will be invited to things. It will feel like you don't have time for them, or maybe they're not your most, but say yes. Because that gives you who knows what opportunities will come from that experience, and that's how doors get opened, and that's how relationships form, and those kinds of things. And so it has stayed with me always, and even still, any staff team that I've been a part of will say, I say all the time, we need to have a yes spirit. We need to create yes space. You've heard, I
have, and it resonates so deeply. Wow.
And so that goes all the way back. And then, over the years, we've had different interactions, but then when she retired as a bishop in the church, and our president at the time, Tom Locke, invited her to come onto our staff, and we got to work directly together in leadership ministry. It has just been such pure joy. The 2 colleagues, friends, mentors that I've had in this work in leadership ministry have been Gil Rendell and Bishop Janice Huey. Really, right?
Yeah, right.
It has been such an amazing journey for me, and I have learned so much. But also, they're 2 of my biggest encouragers, and I know they're constantly supporting and lifting up. So it's not. It feels so, kind of mutually, just, I don't even know. I don't even know how to talk about how just lovely both of those friendships have been, and relationships, and how much I've learned and grown, and what a difference it's made. It's good.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Thank you for letting us go down that road. So yeah, Lisa, take me down that journey then from serving in local churches and and connect me to moving towards foundation
Yeah.
service. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So while I was in commerce, I there were a lot of things going on, and it's probably a whole other conversation. But there were a lot of things going on in my life that was really bringing me to a place in my prayer life. I often say it like this, like, or think about it this way. A good United Methodist clergy prayer is, dear God, let me bloom where I'm planted, right? Because we're sent. And so wherever we're sent, let me bloom there. And my prayer shifted a bit to send me to where I might bloom, make the most difference. So that was and I don't know if you hear the difference, but there's a bit of kind of urgency and agency to that. Like, let me not just, go wherever, but send me to those places where I can best serve and thrive. And no joke, like 2 months after I started regularly praying that prayer in my quiet time, I got a call from Cliff Christopher, who started Horizon Stewardship Company, and he's a United Methodist pastor in Arkansas. And he invited me, asked if I'd be interested in coming and doing fundraising work and with Horizon Stewardship. And they had done a campaign with us, and it was amazing. It was so transformative for our congregation, and not just raising the money, but what it did to our prayer life and to our sense of focus on our mission. And it was a little like in youth ministry, you could do more in 1 week of summer camp or of a mission trip than you could in the whole year of Sunday school and NYF. That's sort of how it felt. It was like this kind of revival-esque experience for us. So I loved it, but I loved being in the church too. And so when he called, I'm like, what? I'm a local church pastor. Why would I do that? But I said, well, let me pray about it. Let me think. And there was just this kind of aha of I'm in this, that I, again, clarity of the Holy Spirit in the midst. And so I said, I'll talk with you. And so I, went out there and talked with him, and then I met the crew, and I realized that what I experienced in our church was not a one-off. It was actually the work that there was I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 on his team, and he had no women, which is why he called me. But they, every one of them was about transformation. Every one of them was about disciple making and helping the church make disciples, and that generosity would come out of that. And I'm like, ooh, this sounds cool. And so I started doing that part-time on the side while I pastored the church. And I did that for 5 years, including when I went to Richardson. The Richardson piece was part-time. And actually I was appointed to Horizons as a ministry strategist, and then part-time with First Richardson. And I loved that work. It just made me come alive. I loved that work, walking alongside clergy and lay teams to do this generosity work, to deepen their prayer life and their sense of purpose. And anyway, that was really fun.
Yeah.
And then I had a call from Tom Locke, who was president of TMF, and he invited me to come and do the one job that I thought would take me from Horizons, that I thought would never be my job. Ever. I never imagined, but it was the one thing and that was to be basically the succession plan for leading the leadership ministry. And I could see that TMF, with their cohorts at the time, it has shifted dramatically in the last, we're about to celebrate 20 years of leadership ministry. At TMF, and the first 10 years was cohorts, Lilly funded, really wonderful work that was done, and but that was before everybody was into leadership ministry. Now every conference has focused areas on leadership, and it was So we really said, what's ours to do when we began to make that shift. So I can talk more about that. But just to say that I went to the team at TMF and got to be part of forming the next iteration of leadership ministry at the foundation. And so, and again, we can talk about that, but here's the piece I want to say about foundations and the church, because I feel like this is really, I think foundations play a really important role in the life of the church, and especially right now with all that's happening. So foundations have the opportunity to sit on the edge of the church. So even if foundations are structurally tied to their conference, they still are not, usually anyway, immersed or enmeshed in the responsibilities and the hairball, if you will, of the structure. And so they can do things without being responsible for the workings of the church. They can do things without asking permission, usually, right? They sit on the edge, and change happens in a couple of major places. It happens through leaders who sit at the center and have to make pivots, and it happens through the edge. And when the leaders are mired in a lot of very difficult structural kinds of hairball kinds of work, it's really important that you have partners on the edge that help you see that work. And foundations have the opportunity to play that role. And so, yes, I grieved leaving the local church when I went to the foundation. And I felt, it was really hard, but I saw the potential. I remember how I'm in a covenant group, and we've been together 25 years. And I've already mentioned Cammie, who's part of that. But one of my covenant sisters said, because my grief was really deep and I was processing it with them. And she said, why don't you leave? Go back to the local church. And it hit me again, a moment of clarity. Oh no, the potential is so great. And I believe in it so profoundly that I don't want to leave. I want to be a part of what is happening. And I think right now, while the church, the United Methodist Church, is in this moment of this season, I won't even call it a moment, that does not do it justice, but in this season of instability, and what is emerging is the new UMC, but also the GMC and some independent churches that are finding their way to be Wesleyan in the world, foundations have a really important role of stability with the mission, right? That our purpose, and particularly with TMF, we have said our purpose is the mission of the church, not the organizational structure of the church. So we are going to stand with you while you figure out how to best live into your mission. And our client is the purpose of the church, not the organizational structure of the church, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I love it. And I think I'm absolutely in the best place to live out my ministry right now, and hopefully for the rest of my ministry. Yeah.
We'll take a quick break. So, Lisa, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the history of Texas Methodist Foundation and Wesleyan Impact Partners. And I know that there's a special relationship with those two organizations. So I'd love to just hear a little bit about, how those organizations came to be, and even what maybe they're doing right now.
Sure. Texas Methodist Foundation has, I think, a really fun and interesting history. because it was formed in 1938. So it was in the aftermath of the Great Depression. And what was happening in Methodism was they were feeling the economic pinch and struggle. And, so bishops in Texas weren't even getting paid. And there was, it was just really a struggle. And what I love about what happened in forming Texas Methodist Foundation is it was a group of really deeply devoted they weren't United Methodists, Methodists, and they were strong lay persons and a couple of bishops in the mix or whatever, but particularly these lay voices that they didn't form the foundation to bail the church out. That was not the reason. They formed it in order to help the church live into its purposes. So we say today our mission, and we did a lot of work to discover this and to unearth this mission. Our purpose, our mission, is to empower the church in the achievement of its God-appointed mission, right? And that God-appointed mission came from those early foundational documents of TMF way back in 1938. So the sense that our purpose is to help the church stand as tall as it can in order to live into its mission. And that purpose continues to guide us today because, one, it reminds us that we're all in with the church, right? That and the broadest sense of that, it's congregations, but it's more than that. It's nonprofits. It's the work of the church. It's the body of Christ in the world, right? It's the fullness of what it means to be the body of Christ in the world. So, and for the sake of that body of Christ living into its purpose. That's why we say that the client of the church is the client of TMF is the purpose of the church. We're all about, everything that we do is to help strengthen the church's mission. And that's going to take different forms. A good bit of our work, as you might imagine, is with congregations for sure. And it's going to continue to be. But even congregations are taking different forms now. And so we want to walk alongside those emerging forms of congregation. So that history of these courageous leaders who said, how do we help the church be its strongest witness, continues today as we think about what it is to walk alongside the church and help it be its strongest witness. So I love drawing on that history that continues to guide us today. And then the thing I would say about Wesleyan Impact Partners is it was formed really from kind of preceding organizations in the EUB, the Evangelical United Brethren Church, and the Methodist Church. And when the merger happened, a United Methodist Development Fund was formed and housed at General Board of Global Ministries. And it was a loan fund, and it was well run, and it was specifically geared to and formed to help provide financing for congregations, particularly who might not otherwise get traditional financing, and realizing that was a need, and that's why it was housed at Global Ministries, and it was run very well, and they had with their earnings had formed this kind of pocket of money, if you will, that was undesignated, that has gone now to create the support and capital for those loans. And so it's just a strong organization. And when GBGM was moving from New York to Atlanta, they began to look at, do we need to house this? Is this mission creep for us? And then reached out to TMF because they knew we could handle the loan fund It was about a third of the size of our existing loan fund. So they knew we could handle the loan fund, but in terms of managing that, but also they were so excited about the work that we were doing in leadership ministry. And they realized that they could, in fact, instead of just growing their undesignated endowment, that they could actually put money back into the church to make it strong. And so today we do have, you called it kind of an interesting relationship, and we have two different boards. They are two separate organizations with the IRS, but we share a staff and we share a key purpose, right? And so they have different geographies and they have different services, but it is all in service to the church's mission. And so it's been fun to work with the two organizations and what they do. So we both do loan funds, and that feels like really important work for the sake of the church. So the way that works is that individuals and congregations and conferences and agencies and such purchase notes, if you will, right? They have deposits, which is, a lot like a CD or a savings account, if you will. So they earn a little bit better than you'll get at a bank. And then those dollars actually then get invested in those loans. And so it's a kind of impact investing, if you will, because those dollars all get put to work for the good of the church. And so I just hope anyone listening, just not to be shameless about this, but at TMF, it can be as low as $1,000. At Wesleyan Impact Partners, it can be as low as $100 that you can invest that then gets reinvested in the church. And then everything that we earn off of that from our spread gets put back into leadership ministry and grants and other things to help the church's mission. So it's just such a virtuous cycle. And so I just hope everyone is investing in their local foundation, because if your money's sitting at a bank, then it's not working for good for the church, right? And so, yeah. Anyway,
Wow.
I so believe in the work that we're doing as foundations, because we're helping churches be good stewards of their funds, and then at a minimum. And then when you go beyond that, many of us are then investing back into clergy leadership or congregational work of planned giving and generosity. And all of that makes a difference as we think of the big picture of helping the church have its strongest witness. And so it just feels like really important work.
And it's a different facet of the important work. But my experience of TMF and Wesleyan Impact Partners is this desire to invest in those who are building the church on the ground, both in the center, but also and named those on the edge. The church is built in between those spaces. And so thinking about both becomes super, super important. I've also experienced that, and this may be more on the Wesleyan Impact Partners side, but I've experienced your embrace of the Wesleyan family, and thinking about, I've experienced you all as being very committed to the United Methodist Church, but also recognizing that the UMC is a part of what we might call a Wesleyan ecosystem. And thinking, and so what is sort of the heart of investing in the larger Wesleyan tradition for you all?
Yes. Okay. So great. I love going down this path. So, and I would say it's true of TMF and of Wesleyan Impact Partners that, and so here's the way I would say it. And I may wander a bit, but just, so we're all, if we go kind of to the 100,000 foot and we look at what's happening in the spiritual landscape. And we're all seeing it and we're talking about it in different ways, but there's a clear and researched and quantifiable trend happening where fewer and fewer people are affiliating with organized religion. You can track that way beyond United Methodism and even mainline. Like, it's just fewer and fewer people are affiliating with organized religion and any institution or organization, right? And so that's been tracked for a couple decades now and such. But at the same time, there's this rise in kind of a spiritual hunger, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's very real opportunity for all of us who are deeply committed to the church's mission, to the gospel message, to the call of God on our lives, like all of it, into making the world a better place and for flourishing humans and all of this, that there's this opportunity here to meet the needs of the spiritually hungry in perhaps different ways than we have in the past, because if they're not going to come and join congregations in the same way that maybe has happened in the past, then it's an opportunity for us to think differently. And part of the work that we've done at TMF and Wesleyan Impact Partners is to realize that we want to be looking around the next corner and saying, what is the work of the church as we move into the future to help it have its strongest witness? And one of those things is that we kind of loosen our grip, if you will, on the primary delivery system that we've had, which is the attractional model church, and say we need to be but more expansive and creative in how we understand faith communities and what that looks like. Yeah. And also that expression of it is going to look different than congregations, but it's also not as the denominational loyalties are not as strong as they once were. And so how do we move into embracing the church's mission in the multiple expressions that exist? And of course, that has very real implications for us as an organization, but for many of the folks that we work with, as the United Methodist Church is fracturing. And so I would say fundamentally for us, we're deeply committed to the church's mission and realizing that is going to be lived out in some different expressions, denominationally, theologically, but also even on the ground in congregations and faith communities that are being formed that look different than they did, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So maybe it would be helpful if I got a little more practical on what that looks like for us. I kind of did the 100,000.
Yeah, let's go there. Yeah.
So, I would say for us both these organizations, deeply formed and shaped and committed to the United Methodist Church for as long, because both existed before the merger in 68, all of these years we've been United Methodist, right? So our boards are United Methodist, our relationships are United Methodist, our clients, our congregations, and many of us who are in leadership are United Methodist. Many are clergy, continue to be clergy in the United Methodist Church. So that's very interesting as we lean into what is happening in the church right now. And so, what I would say is, because we live on the edge at the foundation, though we have all these ties to and continue to be deeply committed to the United Methodist Church, we also see ourselves operating on the edge and committed to the mission of the church not the institutional structure of the church. And so, as many of our clients have made the decision based on their own context and discerning their own best way to live into their purpose, they've made the decision to disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church and either be independent or we've got Free Methodist, we've got Nazarene, we've got GMC, we've got clients across some different parts of the Wesleyan family, and now we have clients that are Anglican and AME. We've got loans that, so really we've got really lovely, beautiful tentacles and partnerships across the Wesleyan family. And what I have loved about this is that we have not, it has been our purpose to empower the church in the achievement of its God-appointed mission that's driven us. We continue to stay deeply committed to our purpose, which means we can help serve United Methodist, AME, GMC, independent Wesleyan churches, right? We can go beyond and are still living out our purpose as we help those churches be as strong as they can be. And we made those decisions way before General Conference of 2019, actually. We made those decisions at TMF. We made that decision in 2017 at Wesleyan Impact Partners. We made the decision around 2019, but we were already in conversations before that. And so the decisions were made and have been reaffirmed every year since then with our board, that this is actually the way that we can best live into our purpose is to serve the broader Wesleyan family and the multiple expressions that are emerging in the spiritual landscape right now to best live into our mission. Wow. So, I mean, all that's it's just felt like the best and right next step to live into our purpose. Is that helpful?
It's very, very helpful. And I'd like to then sort of bridge then to what happened in 2019. And Lisa, this podcast is called Bar of the Conference. It's about the stories that are shaping United Methodist and how those stories are going to shape specifically what happens on the floor of the next General Conference.
Right.
And one of the reasons I wanted you on this podcast was the role of foundations and how they're shaping our church. But also curious how the passage of the traditional plan, which I believe is a very significant moment in the history of United Methodism, I'm curious how it impacted the organizations that you're leading right now. Right. And if at all, maybe it didn't. Maybe it was just a historical point, but TMF and Wesleyan Impact Partners just keeps moving along. But I'm curious if there was an impact, if there was a response or a reaction even after what happened in February 2019 and the passage of the traditional plan for you all. Right.
Gosh, there's so many directions we could go with this, Derek. So organizationally, structurally, and our purpose, our day-to-day work, like we had already made decisions prior to General Conference of 2019 that would continue our work on a path that was deeply centered in our mission and that would also make it possible for us to work with, as I've already said, anyone in the Wesleyan family. So whatever would happen in the United Methodist Church, we were prepared in terms of our purpose to move forward and to continue our work. But that being said, the reality of what happened at General Conference was the beginnings of, or not even the beginnings, because the beginnings happened way before that, but it sort of made it clear that there was going to be a split, right? That folks were going to fracture. I mean, that became clear, and that it was unclear who would begin to leave and how that would happen. The United Methodist Church had in that moment reaffirmed its stance on human sexuality. So would more progressive folks leave given that stance, or it was just unclear, or would more conservative folks say, we're really kind of ready to not be having this conversation anymore. We're going to form our own, which is what happened. But it was unclear what would happen. But what was very clear was that the tension in the system, being as even as the vote was, being all the dynamics that were happening, that the structure of the United Methodist Church could no longer hold the tension, that it was going to fracture. So how it would do that was unclear. So for us, the impact, and it's really the most of that impact has been since the disaffiliations started, because the impact is relational, right? The impact is the pain in the system, and I think it's all been more difficult, there's more wounding than anybody imagined.
Yeah.
And we can trace psychologically, sociologically, why that is, and how anxious systems behave and how anxious people behave. And I mean, we can do that. But the reality is there's just been a lot of pain. And I would say that is true. That's not just on one side. That's not just United Methodist or just GMC. There's been pain across the whole system. And for us, these are our friends. These are our friends leaving. These are our friends staying. These are our friends getting ugly words said to them, or lies told, or, in the middle of it. These are our friends who are bishops. These are our friends who are pastors. These are, and they're on our boards, and we're in relationship, and we have loans with this person, and we have investments with that. And these are, I can feel it in my body as I say these things. This pain is so real.
Yeah.
And it is, so yes, we made the decisions 5 years ago, but now we're living it, and we're trying to figure out how to come alongside our clients. And when I say clients, these are relationships. These are friends who are staying and who, are ready to move on, ready to kind of be the new thing, and still licking wounds and hurting and smarting, and our friends, our clients, our friends who have disaffiliated, who are trying to figure out, do we trust you? You've been United Methodist so long. Are you really here for us? We think you are. You've always been our friend. You're still the friend you've been. And trying to figure out how to help these churches stand tall too. And all of that is heart work. It is soul work. It is relational work. And it is sitting down at the table over and over and over again with people we care about who are trying to be faithful.
Yeah.
And so, the last year has been really hard, and will continue to be hard because we're in it with the church, and the church is hurting and it's struggling. And so we're trying to be a friend, a conversation partner, a financial services provider at a time when there is more financial instability than the church has experienced in decades.
Yeah.
And some of those churches are the actual congregation is fractured, never mind the annual conference is fractured. Like it is so real, and it is every single day for us because we love the church and we're in it with you. And yeah.
Wow.
So structurally, we were like, great, we just keep going. We're living out our purpose. But relationally, we feel the very real pains of schism. And there is such new potential for the UMC to be strong and focused and clear and moving forward, and the GMC to be strong and clear and focused and moving forward. And for some of these independent churches to find each other and to figure out what connectionalism is in a new way, and to be their strongest witness in their neighborhood and in their community. Like, I believe this could be the greatest new awakening for all of these entities. And I want to help that happen in whatever way, we can walk alongside and help that happen.
Lisa, I just want to observe, something, and it was in the question I asked, and you kind of brought it back of, how are the foundations, impacted, and there's this sense like it could just keep doing its thing. And I think that there was a model of leadership that told us once upon a time that that's the proper posture and response to the chaos of our world, to just keep moving along. But I really appreciate the way you have named the pain that's in the system, the whole thing.
Yeah.
The way that relationships have been impacted. Because what that says to me is and you've already said it, so I'm literally just going to repeat it. You're in this with the church.
Yeah. Which
means this season of pain and separation and back and forths and trying to heal and defend and build and redraw the history, like all of it's happening all at once. I also love how you named that you see a future that is specific to each of, these particular players, but I think that it speaks to the future of the mission of the church, which is bigger than the structure. I'd love you if you could just speak a little bit more about that. What are the signs of life? What are the signs of renewal? What are the bright spots, the new things that you're seeing, the new thing that God's doing across the breadth of TMF and Wesleyan Impact Partners? Like what is that stuff that you're seeing, even in the midst of all of this really, really just less than ideal dynamics?
Right. Sure. So one of the things that I get to see as the UMC begins to kind of move ahead and think about its future, and the GMC gets to move ahead and think about its future, and some of these independent churches are thinking, doing the same, right? One of the things that happens in the midst of disruption is that you begin to get clearer about your identity and your purpose. And I'm hearing those conversations, I'm seeing it. And so what that brings, when you talk identity and purpose, that brings about a new energy, right? That's reminding yourselves what the Holy Spirit is doing in you. You get back in touch with your call, you get a sense that you're part of something bigger. And I'm seeing that in all these different places that are emerging, right? And that's really fun. And And the other really practical thing is everybody's thinking about church planting, because now they no longer, in this whole region of their annual conference or their geography, they've got, they're like, oh, wow, we need to think about what our witness is going to be in that area. And so there's this effort toward planting, which I frankly think is something that we ought to be thinking about all the time, right? And there's a new creativity to that, because there's, again, to that 100,000 foot, like realizing that our inherited models aren't necessarily the best models moving forward. It doesn't mean that we're not always going to have really strong, vital, attractional model churches, of course, but we're thinking new ways about how do we engage our community and our neighbors, and what it means to be a witness in this community or that one. And those are necessarily creative, because we don't necessarily have the church building in that town anymore, or that community. And so we're beginning to think more creatively. And I say that across the board. I'm seeing that in the GMC, and I'm seeing that in the UMC. And when you're in a time of disruption, and when you're in a time where maybe some of the tools and resources that you had before aren't there, then I think you begin to be innovative, right? It's the seedbed of innovation, which is so fun and wonderful. And so I love watching that happen. And I should probably say for your listeners, because they're all, I'm assuming, all over the country, that if you haven't looked at kind of the map of disaffiliations and some of that, Texas and New Mexico is a real epicenter of disaffiliation, and it's also an epicenter of the GMC. So, whereas in some parts of the country that may be less so, it's a very potent and generative reality for us.
Yeah.
And so that is why it is top of mind all the time for us relationally, and in terms of how we see our work and do our work. Wesleyan Impact Partners has a bit of a different vision. Of course, across the Southeast, there's a good bit of strong GMC pockets, and then across the country there are. I mean, it's not. I'm just saying that there's just such a strong presence of folks who've disaffiliated. So, we'll probably have 30 to 40% of our clients who will have disaffiliated. And so that's no small thing. I just want to give perspective.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I also appreciate this recognition that this is where the church is.
Right.
And you're stepping into it.
Yeah.
Not stepping into it, you're staying in it.
Staying, right.
Staying
These
in
are the
it.
same people we were meeting with last week, only now they've been through a lot, or, last year or whatever, but they've been through quite a lot to get here. And we want to help these churches, these pastors, these leaders stand tall.
Lisa, this next question, and we're wrapping up here, but this next question is literally its own podcast series. But what do you see the future of foundation work as it relates to the church? I mean, not just the United Methodist Church, though that's my primary interest, but how do you see if, every sector is going through a transformation and disruption right now,
right?
Across our world. What are you seeing as the future of the work that you do,
yes,
going into the rest of this decade and beyond?
Yes. Well, so I've alluded to this already, or not just alluded, but kind of, I'm a champion of our foundations having a role in helping the church's mission be strong and the church to have its boldest witness. And so I think for foundations, one, we ought to be thinking about, and I think we all are, thinking about how to help the church be a good steward of its resources. So at a minimum, foundations are trying to get good returns on endowments and such, and investments, and so that the church has more resources to invest in its mission. But also, I think we can use our own resources and expertise and ability to convene and be in conversation and to partner to help think about the next ways that the church ought to be thinking about its resources. And, one in particular is churches have an immense amount of property that can be used for good in the world. So how are we thinking about how our property, our buildings, but also our land, our assets, used in ways that bring about good, that bring about equity? It might be affordable housing, it might be senior living, it might be childcare. How are we thinking about the inequities and the needs and even the assets of our community in a way that we can participate in that? And I think foundations have a role in helping churches do that, because we tend to have some expertise in the areas of financial services, and so really helping the church think about being a good steward, but also being creative about living into the future and not just doing things the way we've been doing them, but thinking creatively about new solutions to pain points in the world. And then I would say the third part of that, if I've done three, but is to really invest in leaders in different ways. And some of that is helping leaders on the financial side, their own financial acumen, their own financial well-being, so that they can help their congregations be strong. And I think there's a significant role that foundations can play in that realm, because we tend to know it and live it and understand it. And so to help equip leaders in that front, but also because we're sitting on the edge, how do we help think around the next corner? Who in our system is thinking around the next corner for leaders to be thinking about and living into new ways to be the church and to be a strong witness? And that's certainly a significant part of our work at Texas Methodist Foundation and Wesleyan Impact Partners.
Yeah. So Lisa, do you have hope for the United Methodist Church going forward?
I do. I do. And I have hope for congregations, for local churches, faith communities who are helping people know the love of God in their lives, hear the Holy Spirit, do the loving work of Christ in the world. I mean, I just believe in that, and I want to be a part of it.
Wow. Lisa Greenwood, thank you so much. This conversation has hit like every emotion and thought spark in my body today. But I'm really grateful for the role that you are playing, the role that TMF and Wesleyan Impact Partners is playing. So thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for the work that you do. And thanks for being on the podcast today.
Absolutely. And Derek, you are one of the most creative, forward-looking, enthusiastic leaders in the church that I know. And I'm just delighted to get to spend the morning with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed the episode. Bar of the Conference is produced by the team at Wesley's Revival, a ministry of Studio Wesley. Subscribe to this show on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or Google platforms so you don't miss a single episode. Thanks for joining us, and see you next time.